Forward. Long ago, I came to agree with the brilliant John Dixon Carr, who wisely averred that the natural form of the traditional mystery is not the novel but the short story. It is not uncommon for a detective story to revolve around a single significant clue which can be discovered, divulged, and its importance explained in a few pages. Everything else is embellishment, and novels have more of this than short stories. The classic tale, as invented by Edgar Allan Poe, popularized by Arthur Conan Doyle, and perfected by Agatha Christie, is familiar to aficionados and casual readers alike. A crime, usually murder, is committed. Law enforcement officers are called in and respond with utter bafflement, and assistance is offered by a gifted amateur, a private eye, or an outlier police detective who discovers clues, breaks down alibis, and ultimately identifies the culprit. Mystery fiction has changed a great deal over the years, as have all art forms. And as deliciously satisfying as this type of story may be, it is seldom written today. The traditional tale of observation and deduction has largely slipped into the background. The psychology of crime has become the dominant form of mystery fiction in recent years, replacing the whodunit and the howdunit with the whydunit. Those tales of pure deduction may be the most difficult mystery stories to write, as it has become increasingly difficult to find original motivations for murder, or a new murder method, or an original way to hide a vital clue until the detective unearths it. The working definition of a mystery story for this series is any work of fiction in which a crime, or the threat of a crime, is central to the theme or the plot. The detective story is merely one subgenre, in the literary form known as the mystery, just as are romantic suspense, espionage, legal legerdemain, medical thriller, political duplicity, and those told from the point of view of the villain. I am confident that you will find this to be a superb collection of original fiction about extremes of human behavior caused by despair, hate, greed, fear, envy, insanity, or love, sometimes in combination. Desperate people may be prone to desperate acts, a fertile ground for poor choices. Many of the authors in this cornucopia of crime have described how aberrant solutions to difficult situations may occur, and why perpetrators felt that their violent responses to conflicts seemed appropriate to them. And what a remarkable job the contributors to this volume have achieved. James Lee Burke has stated that this story is the best he's ever written. How fortunate have we been that an unknown story by the much-loved Sue Grafton was discovered among her papers by her widower, and was published for the first time in 2020, 4 years after her death. David Morrell and Stephen King, two authors whose greatest successes have been on the fringe of mystery fiction, have superb entries that make us wish they wrote more in this category. Paul Kemperkos wrote his very first short story, which is so accomplished that it easily made the cut. Sarah Paretsky, who doesn't write nearly enough short stories, proved once again how good they are when she does turn to this challenging form. Doug Allen is back with another highly professional thriller, as are John Floyd and Jim Allen. Plus, here's a long story by Joyce Carol Oates, arguably the greatest living writer who has not yet won the Nobel Prize for Literature. To find the best of these stories is a year-long quest, largely enabled by my invaluable colleague Michelle Slung, who culls mystery magazines, both printed and electronic, for suitable stories. Just as she does short story collections, works by a single author, and anthologies, works by a variety of authors, popular magazines, and perhaps the richest trove to be mined, literary journals. As the fastest and smartest reader I have ever known, she looks at about 3,000 stories a year, largely to determine if they are mysteries, and then to determine if they are worth serious consideration. I then read The Harvested Crop, passing along the best to the guest editor, who completes the selection process to arrive at the 20 that comprise the book. 10 additional stories are listed on an honor roll. Finally, there will be a Lagniappia bonus story from the past. Having the right person serve as the guest editor to launch this series is no small thing. Being willing and agreeing to perform this service is an act of extraordinary generosity. Certainly not the first such act by Lee Child, the creator of the Jack Reacher series, and one of the world's most successful authors. As a national and international bestseller, you may be certain that he is asked to do something virtually every day of his life: write a story, make a speech, sign a book, visit a bookshop or library, provide a quote for a dust jacket, offer advice about how to be a better writer or a more successful one, attend a conference or convention, and even serve as a judge on the Booker Prize Committee, which he did last year. The list goes on. Child has, at the time of writing this preface, written 25 novels in the Reacher series, beginning with Killing Floor in 1997 and continuing to The Sentinel in 2020, which he co-wrote with his brother Andrew. 2 novels have been adapted for the screen, with Tom Cruise as Reacher One Shot, released as Jack Reacher in 2012, and Never Go Back, released as Jack Reacher Never Go Back in 2016. Child had cameo appearances in both. His novels have won numerous honors from the mystery community, and he has been given lifetime achievement awards by the International Thriller Writers, the British Crime Writers Association, and others. In 2019, he was named a Commander of the Order of the British Empire CBE for his service to literature. While I engage in a relentless quest to locate and read every mystery crime suspense story published, I live in terror that I will miss a worthy one. So if you are an author, editor, or publisher, or care about one, please feel free to send a book, magazine, or tear sheet to Miko the Mysterious Bookshop, 58 Warren Street, New York, NY 1007. If the story first appeared electronically, you must submit a hard copy. It is vital to include the author's contact information. No unpublished material will be considered for what should be obvious reasons. No stories will be returned. If you distrust the Postal Service, enclose a self-addressed stamped postcard and ill-confirmed receipt. To be eligible for next year's edition of the Best Mystery Stories of the Year, a story must have been published in the English language for the first time in the 2021 calendar year. I am being neither arrogant nor whimsical when I state that the absolute firm deadline for me to receive a submission is December 31st due to the very tight production schedule for the book. Sending submissions early is better than sending them later. If the story arrives one day past the deadline, it will not be read. Sorry, Otto Penzler. February 2021. The Best Mystery Stories of the Year 2021. The Mysterious Bookshop. Presents. The Best Mystery Stories 2021. The Best Mystery Stories of the Year 2021. Introduction. I was delighted when Otto Penzler asked me to be involved in this new short story project. I felt the request implied he thought I had something worthwhile to offer on the subject. I'm always delighted to create that impression. But sadly, on this occasion, an impression is all it is. I don't know much about short stories, or their true origins, mechanisms, or appeal. My only consolation is I'm not sure anyone else does either. What is a short story? Clearly there's a clue in the name. A short story is a story that's short. A story is an account of events in this context almost certainly made up, and the adjective short acts to separate the form from other types of accounts that customarily tend to be longer. As a compound noun, short story first appeared in print in the year 1877, alongside other compound nouns new that year, including belly button, coffee table, cold storage, genital herpes, medical examiner, musical chairs, stock option, and toilet paper. Some of those things were genuinely new in the 1870s. Cold storage, certainly, which shook up food supply and started the decline of landed aristocracies by breaking their local monopolies on agricultural production. And coffee table was new as well. I suppose, given the rise of the Victorian middle class and stock options, and toilet paper possibly. But others among those things were merely newly named, for example, belly button, which of course we've all had forever, and probably genital herpes too. Which category did short story fall into new? Or just newly named? The latter applies, as a matter of record. A by then established literary form was first called a short story in the year 1877. So, newly named, but without doubt wrongly named, and far from being new. The form could be the oldest we have ever known. No one knows when fiction was invented, or, long before that, the syntactical language that permitted it. Spoken words leave no archaeological trace. As soon as their last echoes die away, they are gone forever. All that is left is speculation. Scientific advances in the field of human origins have been spectacular. But scientists don't like to speculate. Just the facts, Mom. They will agree. However, on a couple of things, some explanation is needed. Of how a relatively weak and vulnerable and not very successful hominid proto-human later came to dominate the whole world and reach outward into the universe. How did that happen? And scientists will agree that complex, coherent, if this then that language with a plan B and a plan C would have required a big brain, which they're happy to show us because that's back in the realm of facts. It's right there in the ground our brains got big enough less than 500,000 years ago. There's a vigorous but very polite argument whether language colonized a freak mutation or whether the increase in size was itself driven by the absolute need for language. But either way, that's when it all started, and it was crucial. A single human was slow and weak, prey, not a predator. But a coordinated group of 100 humans was the most powerful animal the Earth had ever seen. Tooled up, organized, drilled, rehearsed, if this, then that, plan B, plan C. Language came to the rescue. It made all the difference. We survived. Not that things were easy. Pressures were many and various, and sometimes catastrophic. But we stood a better chance than most. We had lengthy discussions, accurate assessments, correct recall of past events, realistic projections into the future. In other words, nonfiction saved the day. Language was a lifesaver because it was entirely about truth and reality. It could have no value otherwise. Possibly it stayed that way for hundreds of thousands of years. Then something very strange happened. We started talking about things that hadn't happened to people that didn't exist. We invented fiction. When exactly? It's impossible to say. The echoes have died away, but we can speculate. Just the guesses, Mom. We know because it's right there in the ground, or on rocky walls that music and representative art date back almost 70,000 years. Both involve some kind of technical intervention drums, with stretched skins, hollow bone flutes with holes carefully drilled for finger stops. Pigments found and mixed. Twigs chosen and frayed for application, whereas storytelling required no technology. We already had what we needed. We had expressive voices and sophisticated language, so it's reasonable to guess storytelling happened much earlier than art or music. Why did it happen? Not to fill our leisure time. We had none. We were still deep in prehistory, still cognitively pre-modern, still evolving. Everything we did had a singular purpose: to make it more likely we would be alive tomorrow. Any notion or activity that didn't meet that need quickly died out, literally. How do we square that circle? How did stories make it more likely we would be alive tomorrow? By encouragement and empowerment and subtle instruction, surely. Perhaps the first made-up story was about a boy who came face to face with a snarling saber-toothed tiger. Maybe the boy turned and ran as fast as he could and made it safely back to the cave, which was encouragement in the strategic sense of maintaining morale by delivering the message that not everything has to turn out bad. And then also in the tactical sense, in that the specific terrain outside the cave was survivable, which was the subtle instruction. You had to go out and hunt and gather. A balance had to be struck between reactive caution and proactive boldness, such that the tribe endured, Then maybe 1,000 years later, the story evolved too, where the boy swings his stone axe and kills the saber-toothed tiger. The first thriller, right there. The boldness is turned up a notch. The tribe not only endures, but prospers. It's worth noting in passing those who neither prospered nor even ultimately endured are very distant evolutionary cousins. The Neanderthals. On its face, that's a surprise. Compared to us, Neanderthals were faster, stronger, healthier, better toolmakers, better organized socially, and more solicitous of one another. They had bigger brains than us, which surely means they had sophisticated language, possibly even better than ours. Yet they went extinct, almost 40,000 years ago granted, after hundreds of generations of extraordinary stress from the Ice Age climate emergency. But we survived it, why us and not them? Those given to fanciful speculation might construct a clue from the actual in-the-ground evidence. Neanderthal settlements tell of occupation by sober, sensible people. They were sporadically nomadic, like all hunter-gatherers. But almost invariably their next settlement was barely out of sight of their last. There is no evidence they ever crossed a body of water without first being able to see land on the other side. The overall impression is one of stolid caution, whereas we Homo sapiens were nuts in comparison. We were bold to the point beyond the point of recklessness. We ranged thousands of miles into unknown regions. Hundreds of times we launched bark hulls onto giant oceans, and only a tiny percentage can have survived to see the far shore, if any. Our brains were wired differently. The Neanderthals did things we didn't. And we did things they didn't. Did that include making things up? Nothing about the jump from nonfiction to fiction was biologically preordained or inevitable. It just happened to us. Maybe it just didn't happen to our distant cousins. Maybe their sober, sensible, stolid brains couldn't provide the necessary pathway. Maybe wild imagination was required to fire the spark. What if Neanderthals never left the world of nonfiction, never entered the land of make-believe, and thereafter, despite their speed and strength and health, and their technical and social skills, what if they didn't make it because of that? Because they didn't have story to encourage and empower and instruct. Maybe that tiny margin made all the difference. What do we know about the stories we had and they might not have had? Nothing, of course, but we can speculate. There would have been a strong central strand, be it encouraging, emboldening, instructing, warning, scaring, or whatever else. All wrapped up in context and diversion, and verisimilitude, but not quite. There would have been a rim of unreality, however faint, to expand our experience, which was the evolutionary purpose of story, to take us places we wouldn't normally go, to shine a beam into corners normally left dark. The stories would have been concise, pithy, and focused. They wouldn't have taken long to tell. Survival was a full-time job. Bandwidth was precious. And now, 100,000 years later, you find yourself currently holding in your hands an anthology featuring 20 outstanding contributions from 20 outstanding authors. I know many of them personally. I bet they think this foreword is crazy. I bet they don't agree with a word of it. I bet they all have more plausible explanations. I bet they're going to quote from my first paragraph. Right back at me, I don't know much about short stories, or their true origins, mechanisms, or appeal. But equally, I bet you'll agree their stories fit pretty neatly inside the 100,000-year-old scaffolding described 2 paragraphs ago. Therefore, you'll also agree the items included here should be called simply stories. And those other things their authors produce from time to time should be called long stories. Seniority should count for something after all. Naming rights, at least. Lee Child, Wyoming, January 2021. Twice an Edgar Allan Poe Award winner, and the record holder in the Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine Readers Award competition. Doug Allen is one of the best short story writers of his generation, and probably of all time. He is also a novelist with a number of critically acclaimed books in print. The author of 11 novels and more than 130 short stories. Doug Allen has been published internationally in English, German, French, and Japanese. His most recent, Murder in Paradise, with James Patterson, was on the NYT bestseller list for several weeks. More than 24 of his tales have been optioned for development as feature films and television. Mr. Allen studied creative writing and criminal psychology at the University of Michigan while moonlighting as a guitarist in the rock group Devil's Triangle and reviewing books for the Flint Journal. His background includes Chinese language studies at Indiana University and extended duty with USF intelligence in Southeast Asia. During the Vietnam War, career highlights? Sipping champagne with Mickey Spillane and waltzing with Mary Higgins Clark. The best mystery stories.